Welcome to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Discover the personal drive, professional journeys, and business strategies that have made a real impact. It's success from the inside out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today we're chatting with Tom McCaffery, an executive expert in executing business strategy and leading high-performing cross-functional teams across manufacturing, supply chain, aerospace, government, and academia. So first, welcome to the show, Tom, and maybe start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I'm doing a few things of late. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of a company called Two River Advisory. That sits underneath a larger company, which is an investment company that I own with my business partner called Two River Investments. I'm also an artist working on a fairly large exhibition, and I've got a book that will be out by the end of the year.
Okay. What's I'll go back on the business side in a second here, but in terms of art, what type of art are you doing?
So in my past history, so I've been an artist for, well, probably the majority of my life, but on the professional side, probably for 20 years now, I've been part of different galleries over the years. And I actually took a bit of a hiatus when I did my master's degree and kind of shut the creative part of my life down for a little while because life was busy and things were happening. But this year I decided I was turning 50 and it was time to kind of get back into that world.
Awesome.
So I've taken on a fairly large exhibition, and so my full name is Thomas Joseph Ross McCaffery. I've
Okay.
always painted under my middle names, which is Joseph Ross. And so I do abstract art basically, although this time around it's going to look very different. I'll still do some abstract, but I will also be doing some collage work as well.
Okay. And where would that art end up being featured? I'm not a guy that's from the art world, so I
Yeah,
don't quite
yeah.
understand the world of it. But
So I don't, I'm actually not part of a gallery right now. I was for many years, and because I've taken a bit of a break from it, I'm not. I jokingly say two things. One is that this is sort of my in a way, because I've turned 50, I'm almost calling it a bit of a retirement party for Joseph Ross. I've always used the two different names because Joseph Ross just kind of separated my work world, which is very different, looks very different from my artistic world. And now I feel like I'm old enough that I can use more of my own name. So I'm sort of retiring the Joseph Ross component, but it will be mainly just a large exhibition that I'm going to put on. So I'm going to rent a space. I don't know whether it'll be for a week or a few days. And then I've also said that although I normally use canvas right now, I'm using paper and wood, and I don't actually have anywhere to sell it. So the idea is I'm going to burn it when it's all done, because I don't want to store it in my basement. So I'll get a gallery at some point in time and maybe try to sell some of it, or I might actually
yeah,
do a large partnership with a charity, and whatever gets sold goes to charity. I haven't actually decided yet.
awesome. Well, it's very cool. And you said you're working on a book that you said it was coming out.
Yeah, so just in the middle of kind of the final draft at the moment. It's a book about managing values in complex organizations. So I've written 5 books in my
Okay.
life, mostly fiction, and I've never really tried to publish one, to be honest. I've just been, again, busy doing other things, but it's a kind of a side thing that I've always done. But I've been writing this book with Hugh Evans, who runs an organization called Cultural Dynamics. And so the book is about, basically putting a couple of fictional characters into management situations where understanding the values of the people that you work with and kind of negotiating those challenges in the workplace is really difficult for anyone. And so
Hmm.
the two characters, one runs a very large TELUS kind of organization, the other one runs a manufacturing organization. So two different kinds of companies, but really the same kinds of people, but different situations, but really values are values. And just kind of using that to draw out the challenges that managers face, and then obviously giving them some direction and some thoughts and some understanding about how to manage people differently in really complex organizations.
Yeah, interesting. So you're using fictional characters to be able to tell a story. So instead of say the like a textbook style approach, it's more story based and story driven to get the point across.
Yeah, exactly. That's not a new thing. I mean,
Mhm.
Adam Grant in a way does similar things, although he,
Yeah,
he'll fictionalize people that he's studied.
right.
I feel like
Lencioni's another one, right?
that's
Lencioni's a
right.
big one. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a more engaging way for people to actually, be engaged with the topic and not getting too academic on it, but actually kind of learning through a situational,
Yeah.
relational type story rather than just a cut and dry, this is X, which means Y kind of situation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And so jumping back on the business sides, you got Two Rivers Advisory, and then there's an investment arm of that as well, you said. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the investment company, well, both companies have been around for the same amount of time. The investment company really has been in operation for almost 3 years now. Does a combination of things, investing in market, but also then investing in specific SMEs that we find along the way. And that's been run mainly by my business partner for the majority of the last 3 years because I've actually had a job, which I can speak more about as well. But I'm coming out into the back into the real world a little bit here. But so he's run the investment arm, and we'd always had the intention with this second company of doing something. And initially that was to invest in property. So
Okay,
we were
on the
going to
real
have a
estate.
property management company. We kind of pivoted from that. Now that I'm coming out, I've got quite a bit of companies that want to work with me, and not-for-profit organizations that want to work for me with me and government as well. So I'm doing a variety of different advisory work with that, and so kind of just getting rolling on a lot of different projects. There's about 9 of them so far.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's quite a bit. So is it like quasi venture capital angel investor type setup?
Yeah, it's a bit of a spectrum to be honest, because it really just depends on the types of. So I always say I don't invest in companies, I invest in people. Everybody's got the next best piece of sliced bread for you to try, and so ultimately, what I'm looking for, and I meet a lot of people, especially when in the working world that I've come from, I have a really large network of people. And I often meet CEOs that I'm just really intrigued by. And, again, they have some great technology or some great experience that they have. But it's the person that really, I can see. And from my work world, it's been really similar for me. I've been an advisor, general manager, COO, CEO type person for the majority of my career.
Yeah.
That advisory thing is really meaningful to me because I've always seen myself as an advisor, even in those roles. I'm working with an entrepreneur who has a business. He wants to grow it, and often the situation I get hired into is I'm here and I want to go there and I don't really know how to do that, but they already have the kernel of the business. And so I'm often working with mature firms looking to scale. So on the investment side, through that experience, I've gotten really attuned to good people doing good things. And so the investment
Mhm.
company will invest in, at the angel stage and at other stages. And then we also have a portfolio that's, just in the general market as well.
Okay, got it. Do you have other partners within that? Like, are you raising capital to be able to invest, or is just you and your partner?
No, it's just the two of us, and that's very strategic
Yeah.
on our parts because our intent is not that we can't get other people's money, but then we work for them, and our
Yeah.
intention is to be in control of who and what we invest in and kind of answering to ourselves. So
Yeah.
sometimes we have our chair hats on, and sometimes we have our CEO hats on, and sometimes we have our janitor hats on. It just really depends on kind of where we're at and what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the two of us, so we're not looking for any outside funds right now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. You talked about you have a real job as well outside of all of this.
Well, I
What is that
did
all
up
about?
until the end of June. So I actually
Okay.
have a kind of a pretty interesting career, I think, in a way that I spent 20 years in industry in senior executive role. So I got my first general manager role when I was 23. Um, So, was at a really senior level for 20 years. And then I've spent the last decade actually on the government side of things. So
Okay.
I was CEO of Supply Chain Canada for a while. I was just executive director with Emissions Reduction Alberta for the past year and a half. I've worked for PrairiesCan, and then I worked for the Alberta government as well. And so, the first 20 years was around growth and supporting individual companies to achieve results. And then the last 10 years has really been focused on economic development and industrial policy, and how to create kind of an economy that's a rising tide raises all boats sort of
Yeah,
scenario. So complex, big picture stuff, which I love, and I may go back to someday, because I do actually genuinely love, as painful as working in government can be sometimes, I find it actually quite satisfying. So I might find myself back there someday. But right now I'm kind of taking a pivot and some time to invest in myself and do some things to kind of grow the companies that I started.
that's great. Yeah, my next question, you did answer it a little bit there, but I'll dive into a bit deeper. Um, that's got to be quite the transition, going 20 years of private and then diving
Yeah.
headfirst into the public sector, where it's very bureaucratic and red tape. And what was that transition like? Was it shocking a little bit at first, and how do you work through that?
Yeah, so I just, I've been so fortunate to work with the people that I have, and on the industry side, I got very involved in associations and working with government. And then when I transitioned into it, um, I don't think, the government you hear people complain about is not the government that actually is. There's some pretty interesting differences. We don't know as much about our government as we think we do as
Mm,
people, and the politicians take a lot of uh, uh, sort of they're viewed as the leadership, but there's lots of other types of leadership inside of government, which I find really fascinating. But the transition for me was, at that time, government focused on having kind of a mixture of expertise. The Alberta government, where you had industry people coming in. They call this industry experts, and I always hated that, because I don't feel like I'm an expert in anything, but that was sort of the moniker that, and our role was, because we came out of industry, I was the director of manufacturing. There was a director of oil and gas services and a director of transportation, and we were all industry people that had that background. And our role was to kind of, again, advise senior bureaucrats on kind of the actual happenings behind the scenes. And we were the closest touch point between industry and government, and often a translator almost at times, because you seemingly have two very, different things trying to collaborate and work together, but often they're actually saying the same thing. They're just using different words. And so that was the part
right.
that I had to learn, was what was, what was one side saying, and what was the other side saying, and what did they actually mean, and how did they align. And that's how you kind of get to the best government policy. Is government often does stakeholder engagement and that type of thing, but they don't often have the translation that they need to. And that's where, my role was, and for a decade, and I loved every second of it, but it took me 2 years to get to that point. I had to learn that. I had to understand that. At first, I didn't actually know that that was the case, that there was this gap between government and industry. And then it sort of slowly started to dawn on me as I got deeper into the government side and started to grow that experience. That was when I really started, some light bulbs started to happen and some things started to happen. And so, I was lucky for that decade to have some really integral roles doing different things, from clean technologies to manufacturing to supply chain, and on down the line, and using my background in industry to actually help, guide government policy. So
Yeah.
it's a good role.
What was the inspiration behind, leaving the private world and going public? Because I
Yeah,
think for a lot of people, they would say, "What the hell? What are you thinking?"
yeah. Well, at that time, I didn't have my master's degree at that time, and I was working for a great company called Plains Fabrication, really good role, and I had gotten to be very, the CEO of that, Chester Nagy, was very engaged in with government and associations, because he had this rising tide raises all boats mentality. So he wanted to engage with government so they understood what was happening in our company and what our needs were. And we had regulatory issues, and we weren't the only ones. And so it was this kind of banding together of industry, which is why I love manufacturers so much, because they're in competition, but at the same time, they recognize the need to collaborate because that's really what they do as companies at the end of the day. So they sort of extend that beyond. And so, that transition for me happened because I wanted to do my master's degree. And actually, my role with Plains was kind of twofold. It was to help build the management team out more broadly so that at some point, if the owners wanted to, they could step back and, I would sort of facilitate being the person, but there would be more management capacity. So there were managers, but Plains had gone through, they were trying to achieve doubling their revenue at the time and growing their people. And so the idea was, well, we either want to sell the company or we want to have this management structure that will run the company. And that was my role, was to develop that. We had gotten close to having a sale at the time, and it looked like it was a good transition point, and the role came open. And because I had been so connected, I just sort of said, well, hey, would I be good at something like this? And they said, yeah, you're the exact type of person that we were looking for. And for me, I wanted to do my master's degree. I didn't want to work 60 hours a week while I was doing it. And they were also going to pay for part of it, although I don't think they do that anymore. But at the time, that was also a nice little fringe benefit. And I thought it would actually diversify my resume because I had fully intended to come back to industry at some point. I think it confused my resume more than it diversified it, because now government people think I'm an industry guy and industry people think I'm a government guy. So basically, I'm, mostly can't get hired anymore because nobody knows who I actually am. But for me, it was really just this diversification and learning something new and kind of stretching my boundaries. And then I fell in love with it. And honestly, I'm really good at building business models. I'm probably the skill that I'm best at. But it bores me where compared to working in government where you have these big, like critical issues, these huge, massive problems and this slow moving machine. And there's this challenge of negotiating and collaborating. And I just find that really kind of gets me out of bed in the morning versus like just the get on the money treadmill and make money, make money. I'm good at that, but it isn't really what, I'm passionate about.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on the investment side of the Two Rivers structure that you have you guys invested in like multiple companies, or is that something new that you're looking at?
Yeah, so we've just taken, I'd say our first big position for us in a small company called VL Energy. Um, we have a couple of others that we're actually looking at the moment. And so we haven't taken like a second position at this point. So we have a significant, again, significant for us. We don't have millions and millions of dollars.
Hmm.
But we've got a significant amount of money that we're looking to move. So right now, most of it's sitting in different market positions. We've just cashed out of quite a few of them because the intention now that I'm, in the first month I call it jokingly call it unemployment slash self-employment. Uh, and so I'm in the first month of that, and so the intention is us to work together now to find more investments to make as we move forward.
Yeah. And what types of businesses are you looking at, or
I don't
opportunities, I should say, are you looking at?
Yeah, it's pretty broad, and that I actually, when you do everything, you do nothing. So I think there's a
Mhm.
little bit of a challenge in that. We haven't really challenged ourselves to hone in on anything specific. So again, it goes back to we have a large network of people that we know. Some of them have started companies. We just talked with another company this morning called Shoot 360, which I think is really interesting. And so we're kind of building it out, but I don't think we're gonna at this point, and which may be a mistake in the future, but right now at this point, we're not really honing ourselves into any specific types of investments that we're looking to do. We're just looking for good people
Mhm.
with big ideas that we think we can buy into and then support them on the back end.
Yeah.
That's part of it as well, is taking our expertise and trying to blend that in and help them to hopefully reduce some of their anxiety as
Hmm.
business owners and help them achieve more efficiently whatever it is they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and that's something I've seen in organizations like that where they're very small, you and your partner, and then you're going out and making these investments, those organizations, as from an investor standpoint, are typically the best when it comes to assisting on an advisory level as well, right? Because, if I'm sitting there as the entrepreneur and you're getting money from a bank, well, the bank, as much as they might say they're going to, they're not going to help you out in any way other than that capital. Whereas if you're using one of the, a smaller investment company or group like yourself, you're very motivated to go and help from that advisory and share some of those insights. Is that kind of what the structure you see doing?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit, it depends on that as well. Like sometimes I'd say that our expertise blends really well, but sometimes it's not necessarily us stepping in to help. I think in some cases, again, that broad network that I've gained over the last decade on the government side, meeting lots of different, business owners, government people. I've been pretty lucky in having a pretty healthy network. And so a lot of times what I find myself doing in these early days, I've got a couple of clients who, I'm not actually invested in them, but I'm helping them navigate government relations or looking at different funding opportunities and, trying to help them get their project off the ground or get their first installation or whatever it is they're doing. In those scenarios, it's not often me that's the one doing anything for them other than making the connection.
Mm-hmm.
So one, clients looking at different things like carbon capture, but they don't know which technology they're going to use. Well, I just worked for Emissions Reduction Alberta for the last 2 years. And so, I don't know everybody, but within that
Mm-hmm.
network of people I now have, I can go back and say, well, hey, here's a company that's looking to be on the purchasing side of carbon capture, which there's not enough of those companies right now, but that's a unique position for them to be in. I can help them to kind of navigate that world of technology and, try to find the best version for them that would be helpful. And in the meantime, also look at, well, what government funding could be available for that. And,
Right.
what strategic conversations do you need to have? And same thing, through the regulatory landscape and all of that. I don't know everybody, but I know people who know people. And so again, it's making connections and trying to help them navigate that. So it's a little bit all over the map again. And I keep saying to myself, again, that model of if you do everything, you do nothing. So
Yeah.
what, maybe my job is not CEO, it's the director of nothing. I'm not quite sure yet. So
The director of nothing, that's do would be the acronym
that's
for it.
right. That's right. I'm the
Yeah.
doer. Yeah.
The doer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say, I think when it comes to being a generalist in advisory, that can be really beneficial sometimes. And like, well, you just said it on the connector side. That in a lot of cases is probably the most value that anybody can bring because I think we all have our pros and cons, right? We're all good at some things.
Yeah.
We're poor at other things. Um, but if you know the people that are good at those areas and you can connect those individuals, I think that's, sometimes the biggest value that you could ever bring to a business is just bringing them the right person.
And in a way, as a manager, so I've always said that as Alberta companies especially get management very wrong. We take our best welder and we want to make them
Yeah.
a manager now. Oh, you know all this, so you should be the manager. Well,
Yeah.
I would say that's like asking a welder to be a plumber.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you would never do
Or
that in the real
worse.
world, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for me, what I've always focused on as a GM, and even focused on in government is like I don't know everything, right? I
Mhm.
can know a certain amount about certain things, but those network connections, understanding people, understanding communication, understanding values, being an interpreter between two different people, there's a huge amount of value in that kind of work. But actually, from an advisory standpoint, it makes it kind of difficult to sell that, because companies want you to get to, they're trained to get to your value proposition. What do you
Yeah.
do? And it's like, well, at the end of the day, I actually don't consider myself a generalist when it comes to management, but the management role itself should be viewed as more of a generalist kind of
Mhm.
role where you're actually supporting the experts to do what they need to do, right? And it's not about the work itself. So how did I grow two companies like Plains Fabrication? I helped them to double their revenue in 2 years. Is
Mhm.
that because I'm magic? No, it's because they had this phenomenal company, this amazing customer base, these ridiculously intelligent, welders, engineers, project management people, and everybody has to come together to achieve a goal. And the safety people don't understand necessarily how they fit inside of that. And again, I'm translating for them. I'm like, well, if you kill someone on the job, that's going to cost someone $1.5 million to $3 million.
Yeah.
And so if you take what you do and you convert that to the executive team as, hey, I'm not just here as a layer in your company. I'm actually helping you to reduce risk to the tune of $3 million. It's changing the conversation, and nothing about what you do is different. And so that's my role across everything. And so I come into these companies who do highly technical things, and I just call myself a dumb business guy. And I dumb down what they do, and I understand their value proposition, and then I understand the values of what everybody has internally in the company. And how we doubled revenue was by synchronizing all of those pieces together, and
Yeah.
trying to maximize the efficiency of what everybody is actually doing. And you can do that in small pockets, or you can do that across the whole organization. But it takes someone that has that sort of blanket view. And I always say, I'm not good at anything, but I
Yeah.
know lots of people who are good at lots of things. And so supercharge those people who are good at those things by identifying it and helping them to drive forward. And so,
Yeah.
again, good value proposition, hard to explain because I just used about 10,000 words to explain it. And so, we'll see how things go, but so far so good because people know what kind of value I bring to the table. They
Yeah.
know what kind of people I know, and they want access to that. And it's been a good position to be in so far this early on into developing the company.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually find that sometimes when you have somebody leading an organization or leading a team that doesn't have the technical expertise, it's actually better and more efficient and
Yeah,
I don't want to say easier, but it allows a new set of eyes to come in that's not going to look at it from a technical side. You don't need to know, say you're running a welding shop. You don't need to know how to weld to run a welding shop. You're trying to manage a team and clients and customers and whatnot. But again, I think it can be beneficial not to have that technical insight because now you're really coming out and saying, this is how we work on the business. And that's all you can do is work on the business because you don't know how to work in the business. So
yeah.
you're forced to be able to go and look at that growth.
You have to gather. So, and on the government side, that's also why I'm good at stakeholder engagement as well, right? I gather, I may have ideas and thoughts and whatever, but I have to go gather information from lots of different people. Industry was really what trained me to do that because
Yeah.
I'm the supply chain manager of a company that runs twin otters. Well, I don't know anything about flying an airplane, building an airplane, but I'm a supply chain guy. I got to get everything where it needs to be when it needs to be there. And if it doesn't happen, guess who they're looking at, right? And so you kind of learn, and you need to know accounting because you got to pay people, and you need to know HR. There's so many different aspects to what you need to know. And it's that same kind of alchemy, I guess, at the end of the day that you need to be able to understand how much you don't know, but you still have to understand what you're actually trying to achieve. And so you can, supply chain people have a little bit of that secret sauce if they learn to kind of, and we don't see enough, supply chain people in really major roles, in my opinion, because they have this capability. They understand all these different languages enough. And I believe you're right in that. And I think it's something that business people have a bit of a blind spot around is they think you need to have the technical skill to run the team. And actually, it's probably the thing in my experience that makes you the least effective. I was a supply chain guy for 16 years or part of these really major supply chains. I don't know how to run a forklift.
Hmm.
I can do accounting, but I'm not an accountant. I'm
Yeah.
a, I purposely don't do things because if I get good at it, I'm going to go do it because it's
Yeah.
faster for me to do it than, but if I don't know any of that, I have to figure out what everybody else knows. And then I have to make them be better at what they do. And it's so often is just asking the stupid question and
Hmm.
someone going, well, I have a barrier and we've always tried to do this and we've never been able to do it. And, you start unpacking things for people. And it's the same thing as an advisor. I come in and, I don't understand a lot in, the digital world. I keep calling myself an analog person in a digital world now. But the digital thing is the same, it's manufacturing, people doing things to produce something for someone who wants to buy it,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very basic stuff. And when you can boil things down to the basis of what it is, you don't need, to be an expert in how to make clothes to go help a clothing company to be more efficient. And, and so it's about having that network of individuals you can bring in to help them to deploy to make them better at what they actually do, right? And no different than a digital company. They, I need 20 years of experience. Well, first of all, that's unrealistic because, we haven't really been digital for that long. And so, unless we're counting digital cash registers and in the,
Right.
so there's this sort of unrealistic thing that we grow in business where we always want to hire this person who knows it all, who's going to hit the ground running. I love to hear that because it means you actually don't know what the hell it is you want for a person. Because if that person can come in and hit the ground running, they're probably worth 10 times the amount you're willing to pay them. And they're going to get bored real fast. So, we have to, again, this is a management sophistication component where when I hear someone go, well, I want someone who's like a year away or 6 months away from being ready for this role, and I'm going to help them build themselves, help them build their capacity and their understanding. And now there's something in it for them and there's something in it for you as an organization. But instead the manager's like, I don't want to manage. I want to hire someone. So, those are the aspects for me as an advisor where I can come in and, I'm not going to call somebody out for any of that, but I understand those mechanisms of helping you or helping someone make the right introduction or connection to help them drive the business further ahead.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense for sure. Well, Thomas, if somebody wanted to learn more about what you're doing or get in, connect with you, where would they go for that?
Yeah, so Two River Advisory is the name of the company. It's actually a website coming up here in the very near future.
All right.
But you can reach me at Tom at Two River. There's no S, just tworiver.ca. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of connections on LinkedIn. I do a lot of work across LinkedIn. But yeah, you can reach me there as well. So happy to connect with anybody and hear more about your business and anytime
Awesome.
I can connect. And I really appreciate you having me here today. Giving me some time to try to develop my value proposition a little bit more as I talk myself through it.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, certainly appreciate having you on the show today and look forward to hearing what's coming up on the investment side and everything else you're working on.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
You've been listening to Beyond Wealth, Success Unscripted with Matt Calnan. Want to be our next guest? Visit beyondwealthpodcast.ca/guest. See you on the next episode.